The phone call that changed everything. It was a rainy Tuesday evening in San Jose. The kind of rain that didn't make a sound but soaked everything in silence. Sundar Pichai was sitting quietly in his home office, a place filled with books, soft, light and memories. His phone buzzed once. He looked down. The name on the screen froze him. It was his younger brother, Arun. They hadn't spoken properly in years. Sundar's finger hovered over the green button. His chest felt tight, not from fear, but from something heavier. Guilt, maybe. Or regret. He answered. "Hello?" he said, voice steady but quiet. There was a pause on the other end, then a shaky voice. "Anna, I need your help." Aaron rarely asked for anything. Not when their father struggled to pay school fees. Not when their mother sold her bangles so Arun could get textbooks. Not even when Sundar left for America, leaving Arun behind with dreams that didn't quite fit the small town they came from. Sundar straightened in his chair. "Tell me everything," he said. And Arun did. He spoke about his wife, Priya, who was sick, really sick. He had taken her to 3 hospitals, spent everything they had. But the doctors said the treatment would cost more than Aaron could ever make in 5 years. "I didn't know who else to call," Aaron said, voice cracking. There was silence on both ends. The kind of silence where you could hear your own heartbeat. Then Sundar said, "I'll take care of it." He thought that would be the end of the conversation, but it wasn't. Because what Aaron said next broke Sundar in a way no business meeting or tech crisis ever had. "I'm not just calling for money, Anna. I need you. I need my brother." Sundar had been in meetings with presidents. He had spoken on stages in front of thousands. But now he was just a boy again, remembering the 1-bedroom home, the smell of dosa in the kitchen, and his brother sleeping on the floor beside him, and suddenly being the CEO of Google didn't mean much. He booked the first flight to Chennai. When Sundar arrived in India, everything smelled of home and heartbreak. The roads were narrower than he remembered. The people still smiled the same. But Arun's eyes were different. Tired. As they drove through the city, Sundar tried to fill the space with small talk. But Arun wasn't interested in weather or food. He finally said, "I didn't just call you to save her. I wanted you to see what you left behind." They reached the hospital. Priya was in a plain white room, machines beeping softly. Her face looked peaceful, like someone who had already let go. "She still smiles when she hears your name," Arun whispered. Sundar sat beside her, held her hand. She opened her eyes, weak but warm. "You came," she said. And for the first time in years, Sundar cried. That night Arun took him home. It wasn't much. A small flat with peeling paint and a fan that made more noise than wind. But it was full of love. Photos on the wall. A school report card stuck to the fridge. Hand-drawn art by their daughter, Mira. Sundar sat down on the floor, cross-legged like they used to. Aaron brought chai in 2 steel tumblers. They drank in silence. "You know what hurts most?" Aaron finally said. "It's not the money. It's that you became a name, a brand, not a brother." Those words hit harder than any insult. Sundar had always believed he was doing right by his family. Sending money. Building a better future. Making them proud. But in doing so, he had left behind the moments that mattered. The laughs. The fights. The dreams whispered in the dark. He looked at Aaron. Really looked. "I'm sorry," he said. Aaron nodded. "Don't be sorry, just stay." For a little while. And Sundar did. He stayed that night, sleeping on the floor with a pillow too thin and memories too thick. And for the first time in years, he felt something different. Home. But peace is never simple. The next morning, the doctor called them in. "We found a match," he said, "but the surgery has to happen in the next 3 days. Or it'll be too late." Aaron turned to Sundar, eyes wide with hope. Sundar picked up his phone to make arrangements. He called his team, his assistant, even a private medical consultant. In Singapore, things moved fast when Sundar Pichai made a call. But that's when the twist came. The donor family changed their mind. They didn't want the transplant to go to someone who wasn't contributing enough to society. It was cruel, unfair, and legal. Sundar was furious. I will talk to whoever is in charge, he said. But Aaron put a hand on his shoulder. No, we don't beg. Sundar looked at him stunned. I'm not asking you to beg, he said. I'm asking you to fight. Arun shook his head. We've fought our whole lives. Sometimes you have to know when to stop. But Sundar didn't believe that. He made a decision then, one that would change everything. He would give something more valuable than money. His name, his voice, his story. He would go public. Not as the CEO, but as a brother. He reached out to a journalist he trusted, told her everything. The story of a small-town boy who made it big but forgot what really mattered. The story of a woman who deserved to live. The story of a brother trying to make things right. The article went viral. Millions read it, and something amazing happened. People started showing up. Doctors, volunteers, strangers with tears in their eyes and kindness in their hands. One woman walked up to Aaron and said, I lost my sister last year. I couldn't save her. But maybe I can help save your wife. She turned out to be the match, but time was short. The surgery was scheduled for the next day, and just when everything seemed like it would be okay, Priya disappeared, gone. No note, no warning, nothing, just an empty hospital bed. The disappearance, the hospital room felt colder than before. Sundar stood in the doorway, staring at the empty bed. For a long moment he said nothing. Just stood there, breathing slowly, trying to understand if his eyes were lying. The sheets were still warm. The soft beep of the machines had gone silent. Her sandals were missing. The curtain fluttered from the fan above as if mocking him. But the person he had come all this way to save was no longer there. Where is she? He whispered. Aaron rushed in behind him. The moment he saw the empty space where his wife should have been, he gasped. His breath short and sharp. He looked around wildly, calling her name. Priya, Priya, are you here? His voice echoed down the hallway, desperate, cracking with fear. A nurse entered, startled by the commotion. What's going on? She asked. My wife, Aaron said, his voice trembling. She's missing. She was here, right here, just last night. The nurse blinked, confused. She glanced at the chart, flipped a few pages. She signed a discharge form this morning, she said. Sundar stepped forward. What? Who authorized it? The nurse shrugged. We assumed it was under your direction. She left with someone. We thought it was family. Sundar and Aaron looked at each other. Neither of them had been there. Neither had signed anything. Someone else had taken Priya. Outside the hospital, the street was loud and chaotic. Horns blaring, auto rickshaws weaving through traffic, fruit vendors shouting about fresh mangoes. But inside Aaron, there was only silence. His thoughts felt distant, like he was watching a film play out from far away. It didn't make sense. Priya had been too weak to walk to the bathroom without help. How had she gotten dressed, signed forms, and walked out without anyone stopping her? Sundar was already making calls. His voice was sharp, fast, efficient. He spoke in short, clipped sentences. Trace her last known location. Check hospital security. Get me footage from the entrance. He was no longer just a brother. He was a man in crisis mode. A CEO used to solving problems that seemed unsolvable. But this wasn't a product. This wasn't code. This was real. This was his family. They got the footage 2 hours later. It showed Priya in a wheelchair, being pushed by a man with a cap pulled low over his face. Her face was calm. Too calm. She wasn't resisting. She wasn't afraid. She even looked back once, right into the camera, as if she knew someone would be watching. That was the moment that haunted Sundar. Her eyes were sad, but peaceful, like she was saying goodbye. Back at Aaron's apartment, the tension was thick. Arun paced the floor, hands clenched, eyes red. Why would she leave? He said over and over, as if repeating it would bring answers. She knew the surgery was scheduled. We found a match. Why now? Sundar sat on the edge of the couch, phone in hand, reading messages, scanning social media, calling contacts. But his mind kept drifting back to Priya's face in that last frame. The way she had looked directly at the camera, like she wanted him to see her leave. It didn't make sense. Unless she thought she was helping. Aaron, Sundar said, slowly. What if she left because she didn't want to be a burden? Aaron froze. What are you talking about? Think about it. The cost, the attention, the pressure. Maybe she thought you'd all be better off without the surgery. No, Aaron said firmly. She's not like that. She wants to live. Then, we have to prove it, Sundar said, standing up. We find her. We bring her back. We remind her that she's not alone. And so the search began. They started with the basics. They called her phone. It was switched off. They visited every hospital within 10 kilometers. Nothing. They asked neighbors, family, even Mira's school teacher. No one had seen her. But then, on the second day, they got a break. A cab driver came forward. He had picked up a woman who matched Priya's description from the hospital area early that morning. She was quiet, polite. Gave him a specific address on the outskirts of the city, a place called Varam Old Age Home. When they reached the building, it was painted in dull colors, surrounded by dusty trees and silence. The kind of place people forgot about. It didn't look like a place for someone like Priya. But the moment they stepped inside, a wave of familiarity hit them. She was there, sitting on a bench in the garden under a drooping tree, dressed in simple clothes, her hair tied back, sunlight falling gently on her face. She looked up when she saw them and smiled, not with surprise, but like she'd been expecting them. Aaron ran to her, fell to his knees beside the bench. Why? He asked, tears flowing freely now. Why would you do this? We had a chance. We had hope. She reached out and touched his face gently. I didn't want to be saved just because you felt guilty, she said. I wanted to be saved because you believed I deserved it. Sundar stood nearby, stunned by her words. But you do deserve it, Aaron said, gripping her hands. Priya looked at both of them. Then prove it, she said. Not with money, not with headlines, but with your heart. That night, back home, Aaron couldn't sleep. He sat on the floor with Sundar, just like old times. The lights were off. Only the ceiling fan hummed above them. You know, Arun said softly. When we were kids, I always thought you were born lucky, smart, focused. I never told you, but I was jealous, Sundar chuckled. I thought you were the brave one, the one who knew how to live. Maybe we both lost something along the way, Aaron said. Then maybe, Sundar replied, we can help each other find it again. And in that quiet moment, they made a decision. They would show Priya that she mattered, not through grand gestures, but through presence. The next week changed everything. Sundar put all his meetings on hold. For the first time in years, he let the world wait for him. He cooked breakfast with Aaron. He helped Mira with her homework. He sat with Priya during her treatments. They laughed at old memories, cried over forgotten ones. And slowly, day by day, something changed in Priya. She began to hope again. Her cheeks gained color. Her voice grew stronger. She even began to dream about the future. But fate wasn't done testing them. Just 3 days before the surgery, Aaron collapsed. He was rushed to the emergency room. Sundar paced the hospital hallway, his heart pounding. When the doctor came out, his face was grim. It's stress, he said. Emotional exhaustion. He's been holding too much in for too long. Sundar sat down hard on the bench, head in his hands. He had come to save one life, but now he might lose another. As he sat there, alone in the cold corridor, his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a message. From Priya. Just 4 words. I won't go through. He read it once. Then again. His hands began to shake. She was backing out. Again. And this time, she meant it. The night she gave up, the message glowed on Sundar's phone screen like a quiet scream. I won't go through. He sat there in the Dim hospital corridor. The white lights flickering above him, their hum loud against the silence growing inside him. The bench beneath him felt cold, almost punishing. Somewhere down the hallway, a nurse laughed at a joke too far away to hear. Life continued, uncaring, while everything inside him began to crumble. He stared at the words again. There was no explanation, no plea, no apology, just that firm, tragic decision. She was giving up. And he didn't know why. He stood up slowly, walking to the window at the far end of the hallway. The city lights blinked outside like 1,000 unspoken possibilities. He leaned his forehead against the glass. It was cold, grounding. For a man who had built technologies to change the world, he suddenly felt like he couldn't even hold on to the people who mattered most. Behind him, Aaron lay unconscious in a hospital bed, a tube in his arm and a beeping monitor beside him. The stress of everything had knocked him down. The very person who had refused to break had now fallen without warning, and Priya, the woman who had been through so much, who had smiled through pain, who had believed when belief felt impossible, was choosing to disappear again. He felt powerless. He had crossed oceans, moved schedules, made calls to some of the most powerful medical experts in the world. But now, none of that mattered, because the decision wasn't his to make. An hour later, Sundar stood outside Priya's room at the care center. The same garden bench where they had found her last week sat quietly under the tree. A few yellow leaves drifted to the ground, slow and steady. She was inside now, sitting on a wooden chair, her arms crossed over her chest, eyes staring out the window as if waiting for something she couldn't name. When she saw him, she didn't smile. She looked tired, not just in her body, but in her soul. He entered without speaking, closed the door behind him. The room was small, barely wide enough for two people to stand side by side. There was a soft smell of incense and cotton. "You read my message," she said softly. He nodded. "Why?" he asked. His voice cracked. She didn't answer at first. She looked down at her hands. They were thin, bony now, the hands of someone who had once held her daughter's fingers while crossing the road, now trembling even when still. "Because it's not just about me anymore," she finally said. "It's about all of you. I see what this is doing to Aaron, to you, to Mira. I don't want to be the reason this family keeps hurting." Sundar knelt beside her, his knees pressing into the rough floor. "You think walking away will protect us?" he asked. "You think disappearing will stop the pain?" She looked at him. There was something in her eyes that scared him, a deep, silent resignation. "Maybe not," she said, "but at least it won't grow." "Priya," he whispered, "you're not a burden. You never were. You are the reason Aaron fights, the reason Mira believes in magic. You are the reason I came back." He took her hand. It was cold. "You are not the weight. You are the heart." She turned away, tears slipping down her cheeks. But she didn't pull her hand back. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I don't know if I'll survive the surgery. I don't know if I'll still be me after." "We're all scared," he said. "But the answer to fear isn't running, it's staying. It's choosing to love even when we're broken." They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "Will you stay with me, before the surgery?" He nodded. "Every second." Over the next 2 days, Sundar never left her side. He brought her favorite food even though she barely touched it. He told her stories of Aaron as a child. The time he broke a neighbor's window and blamed it on a monkey. The time he tried to sell lemonade during a flood and still managed to earn money. They laughed, quiet, short bursts of laughter that filled the room like sunlight through a broken roof. He played recordings of Mira singing lullabies. He even brought Aaron's sketchbook, one she didn't know existed. Inside were dozens of drawings, of her, of their daughter, of dreams he had never spoken aloud. "He draws when he can't speak," Sundar said. "These are his prayers." Priya held the book close to her chest, her eyes shut, tears soaking the edge of the paper, and something inside her began to shift, not loudly, not suddenly, but gently, like a flame remembering how to burn. The morning of the surgery arrived. The sky outside was pale, soft, unsure. Sundar stood in the hospital hallway, holding a cup of chai that had already gone cold. The donor was already prepped. The operating room was being sterilized. The surgeon gave a short nod of confirmation. Everything was ready. But Priya hadn't confirmed. They needed her final consent. A signature. A simple stroke of a pen. And still, she hadn't come out of her room. Sundar looked at the clock. The donor could only wait for another hour. After that, the match would be lost, maybe forever. He walked to her room again. This time the door was ajar. Inside, Priya was sitting by the window, sunlight painting her in gold. She turned when she heard him. "I'm scared," she said again. He walked to her, knelt like before. "So am I. What if it doesn't work? Then we try again. What if I don't wake up? Then you'll know you were loved until the last second." She reached for the pen and signed. They wheeled her into surgery as Aaron regained consciousness. In his hospital bed, he was still weak, but when Sundar told him what happened, his eyes filled with something deeper than joy. Hope. "She chose to live," Aaron whispered. Sundar nodded. "Because you gave her a reason." The hours crawled by. Every minute felt like a lifetime. Sundar paced the floor, fingers pressed together, eyes closed. He thought about everything. About the time they were kids, pretending the ceiling fan was a spaceship. About the nights they shared one blanket and one dream. About the day he left for Stanford, and Aaron had hugged him tight, saying nothing, but meaning everything. And now here they were, fighting not for success, but for survival. The door finally opened. The surgeon stepped out, his mask still on, his eyes unreadable. "We need to talk," he said. What the surgeon said, the room was spinning, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just Sundar's heart, pounding so loudly in his chest that everything else felt like a blur. The surgeon stood in front of him, still wearing the green scrubs, the cap, the gloves, and that impossible expression. Somewhere, between exhaustion and silence, Sundar didn't breathe. He didn't blink. He just stared at the man. Behind them, the hallway had gone quiet. Nurses moved in the distance. Machines beeped softly. But here, in this moment, it felt like time had curled into a tight knot and refused to move forward. "We need to talk," the surgeon had said. And those 4 words held 1,000 possibilities, none of which Sundar wanted to face. "How is she?" Sundar asked, the words barely escaping his throat. The surgeon looked down as if weighing his answer. "The surgery was more complicated than expected," he began. His voice was calm, rehearsed, the kind you hear from someone used to carrying heavy truths. "There were complications, some bleeding. We lost time. Her vitals dropped. More than once." Sundar felt the floor shift under him. The surgeon paused, and then, almost like the second half of a sentence that could end a war or start one, he said, "But she's alive." The air rushed back into Sundar's lungs. He staggered back, caught himself on the wall. His hand gripped the cold tiles, his knuckles white. He looked up again just to make sure he had heard right. "She's alive?" he repeated. The surgeon nodded. "Yes, and stable for now." Sundar sat down, or maybe collapsed. He didn't know. All he knew was that something had cracked open inside him, a dam of fear, of waiting, of helplessness. And now, in its place, something soft and trembling was rising. Relief, and something else he hadn't allowed himself to feel in days. Faith. The next 48 hours were a blur. Priya remained unconscious, her body slowly adjusting to the transplant. The machines did most of the work, keeping her breathing, monitoring every beat, every breath. The room smelled of antiseptic and quiet prayers. Sundar stayed at her bedside through the night, watching the rise and fall of her chest, as if afraid that letting his eyes close would somehow undo everything. He thought about Aaron, now recovering in the next wing, Mira, drawing pictures in the waiting area, her crayons worn down to small stubs. The nurses who moved like ghosts, always there, always silent. And he thought about himself. Not the man who gave keynote speeches, not the man who ran the world's largest tech company, but the man who had forgotten how fragile life could be. He leaned closer to her, whispered stories she couldn't hear, memories, songs, apologies. "I'm sorry I stayed away for so long," he said. "I should have come home earlier. I should have asked how you were. I should have listened." He placed his hand gently over hers. "You're the strongest person I know," he said, "but you don't have to be alone anymore." Her fingers didn't move, but he didn't stop holding them. On the third day, her eyes opened. Softly. Slowly. Like someone waking from 1,000 dreams. The first thing she saw was him. Sundar stood up, afraid to speak, afraid it might scare her. But she smiled. Barely. Just enough to let him know she was still there. "You stayed," she whispered. He nodded, tears threatening to fall again. Always. When Aaron was finally well enough to visit, it was evening. The sky outside was painted with orange streaks. He walked slowly into the room, his face thinner, eyes heavier. When Priya saw him, her lips trembled. She reached out her hand. He took it with both of his, and cried. Long, wordless tears that came from a place too deep for language. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. Sundar watched them from the corner of the room, and for the first time, in years he felt like a part of something that mattered more than work, more than headlines, more than power. He felt like a brother. The news of the successful surgery spread quickly. The media picked it up again. Reporters waited outside the hospital hoping for a statement. Social media exploded with messages of hope, support, and even anger. Anger that someone had almost been denied a second chance because they didn't fit a narrow definition of worth saving. Sundar ignored the cameras. He wrote one short message and posted it online. She lived. And in saving her, I found myself again. The post went viral. Not because it came from a tech giant, but because it came from the heart. Life didn't go back to normal. It grew into something new, stronger, softer. Sundar extended his stay. Weeks turned into months. He began spending time at local hospitals, quietly funding care for families who couldn't afford it. No speeches, no announcements, just quiet action. He walked with Aaron in the mornings. They spoke less about the past, more about the now. He read with Mira every night, learning the names of her imaginary friends, helping her build towers from empty cereal boxes. And with Priya, he simply sat. Some days in conversation, some days in silence, he learned the rhythm of their lives again. He stopped checking his email after dinner. He started remembering the taste of food, the sound of laughter, the feeling of being human. But just when things felt safe, when joy began to bloom again, a letter arrived. It came in a plain envelope, no return address, just his name, written in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was one piece of paper, a single line of typed text. "You were never meant to come back." Sundar stared at the letter, then read it again. His stomach sank. A threat? A warning? Or a truth someone had been holding for too long? Who had sent it? Why now? He folded the paper, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it into his pocket. Outside, the sky darkened. A storm was coming. The storm came quietly that night. No thunder, no flashes of lightning. Just a slow, steady wind that whispered through the streets of Chennai, rattling old window panes and brushing dust off forgotten memories. Sundar sat on the balcony of Arun's apartment, watching the wind move the branches of the neem tree outside. The letter still sat in his pocket, folded once, the crease sharp and deliberate. He hadn't shown it to anyone. Not yet. It wasn't just the words that unsettled him. You were never meant to come back. It was the way they were written. The cold finality, the choice of type over handwriting. It didn't feel emotional, it felt calculated. Whoever sent it hadn't acted in pain. They had acted in silence. He pulled it out again, stared at the paper under the weak yellow light, above the door. It was completely untraceable, no name, no signature, no clue. But the weight of it pressed on him like a stone. The next morning he tried to hide it. He smiled during breakfast, helped Mira with her school shoes, even offered to make chai, though he still hadn't perfected the balance of ginger and cardamom. But Arun noticed. He always did. They were drinking tea in the living room when Arun spoke, his voice low, casual, but firm. "Something's on your mind." Sundar didn't answer at first. He just stared into his cup. "You remember? When we were kids," he finally said. "And you got that anonymous letter saying our father was in debt?" Arun blinked. "Yeah, I remember." "You didn't believe it," Sundar continued. "You said, a real threat doesn't come by mail, it comes by silence." Arun looked at him now, eyes narrowing. "Someone sent you a letter?" Sundar nodded, pulled it out, handed it over. Aaron read it twice, then looked up. "You think it's from someone local?" "I don't know," Sundar said. "But it doesn't feel random." They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Aaron stood up. "We need to find out who sent this." They started quietly, asking questions in the neighborhood, visiting the post office, speaking to security guards at the hospital. Everyone knew Sundar was in town. His presence hadn't gone unnoticed, but no one could point to anyone acting strange or out of place until they spoke to the chai vendor. His name was Keshav. He had been running a tiny roadside stall for 20 years. He saw everyone, heard everything. "You're looking for something strange?" he asked, scratching his beard. "I did see someone odd." "When?" Aaron asked. "2 nights ago," Keshav replied. "Around 11, tall man, stood near the gate, didn't order anything, just watched the building for a long time. Then, left without a word." "Could you recognize him again?" Sundar asked. Keshav shrugged. "Maybe," but he kept his face low. It wasn't much. But it was something. That night Sundar couldn't sleep. He lay awake in the spare bedroom listening to the slow turning of the ceiling fan. The city hummed in the distance. Dogs barked. A train passed somewhere far away. Thought about Priya, about the surgery, about how close they had come to losing everything, and now someone was trying to pull him away again. But why? What had his return disturbed? The answer came the next day, but not in the way they expected. They had just returned from visiting Priya's doctor when they found the front door slightly open. Aaron froze. Sundar stepped forward, heart pounding. Inside, everything was quiet, too quiet. They entered carefully. Nothing looked broken. Nothing was stolen. But something was different. Sundar walked into the living room. Aaron checked the bedrooms. And then, on the dining table, they found it. A second letter. This time, handwritten. The paper was torn at the edge, the handwriting shaky but familiar. "Stop digging. You don't want to find the truth." Underneath the letter was a photograph, an old one, from years ago. It showed Sundar, much younger, standing beside a man in a suit. The background looked like a college campus. The man was smiling, holding a folder. Sundar's blood went cold. He hadn't seen that man in over 20 years. His name was Dev. Dev had been Sundar's roommate during his early years in the U.S. They were both dreamers, both poor, both hungry for a better life. But where Sundar found focus, Dev found frustration. He struggled to keep up. His grades slipped. He blamed the system, the professors, even Sundar. In their final year, something had broken between them. Betrayal. Sundar had found out that Dev had tried to take credit for one of his early research projects, a prototype that would later influence mobile browser performance. Sundar hadn't reported it. He had confronted him privately. Dev had left the program soon after. No contact since. And now this photo, this letter, this warning. "You think it's him?" Aaron asked quietly. Sundar nodded, eyes still on the photo. He's the only one who ever looked me in the eye and said I didn't deserve what I had. But why now? Maybe he heard I was back, Sundar said. Maybe he thinks I'm vulnerable. Arun shook his head. We should go to the police. Not yet, Sundar said. Not until we know what he wants. Over the next week, the tension grew. Priya was slowly recovering. She had started walking short distances. Meera was drawing brighter pictures. Life seemed to be returning to normal, at least on the outside. But Sundar couldn't relax. Every time he left the apartment, he felt eyes on him. Every time he opened his email, he expected another message. And then, one morning, it came. An email from a private server. No subject. Inside were 5 words. Meet me where it began. There was an address attached. An abandoned school building on the edge of the city. It was where Sundar and Dev had once taught evening coding classes to underprivileged kids, a place filled with memories, and now threats. Sundar stared at the screen. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't run. Not anymore. He would go. Alone. That night, he told no one. Not Aaron. Not Priya. Not even Meera. He left a note on the table in case something happened. Then he took a cab through the dark streets, the lights flashing past like thoughts he couldn't quite catch. The driver said nothing. The radio played an old Tamil song. When they arrived, the building looked dead, windows broken, walls cracked. But the door was open. Inside it was pitch black. He stepped in. The smell of dust and wood filled his nose. Dev, he called out. Silence. And then, a voice. From the shadows. You finally came back. Where it began, the room felt haunted by time. Broken desks leaned against the walls like forgotten memories. Bits of chalk still clung to the corners of the blackboard. Faint graffiti from children long grown scratched faded hopes into the walls. And there, near the back of the classroom, where sunlight barely reached, stood Dev. He had aged, but not in the gentle way time softens most people. His face looked sharp like it had been carved by disappointment. Eyes sunken, shoulders tense, jaw set. His clothes were neat, pressed. Too neat for someone living in the shadows. But it was the look in his eyes that hit Sundar hardest. Not rage, not jealousy, but hunger. A need for something deeper than revenge, something closer to recognition. You came, Dev said, stepping forward. His voice had changed. Slower, heavier. Sundar nodded, stepping cautiously into the dim room. You asked me to. You know why? No. Sundar lied, but he did know. This wasn't about the surgery, or the letters, or even what happened. All those years ago, this was about a man who had once stood beside him, believing he too could change the world, and who had watched the world choose someone else. I watched every step you took, Dev said, pacing now. Stanford, Google, the interviews, the applause. And I told myself maybe he'll remember me. Maybe one day he'll say my name. Maybe he'll admit I was part of it. Sundar felt something tighten in his chest. Dev, he said carefully, you were part of it. You were there. You helped me when I had no money. You translated bus signs for me. You shared meals. Dev laughed, a dry, broken sound. But you left, he said. You left and you climbed and you never looked back. You erased me. I didn't erase you, Sundar said. I survived. That stopped Dev. I'm sorry for what happened between us, Sundar continued, but I didn't have time to carry anger or grief. I had to carry my family. He took a step closer. You had your pain, and I had mine. We didn't talk about it. We didn't know how. But it's not too late now. Don't pretend this is about healing, Dev snapped. You came to protect your image. You're still the same, always fixing things just enough to stay in control. Sundar paused. Then shook his head. No, not this time. He pulled something from his jacket, an envelope. He handed it to Dev. Dev opened it slowly. Inside were copies of emails, press releases, news articles, all tied to a new initiative Sundar had launched quietly over the past week. A scholarship, in Dev's name, to support students from underrepresented backgrounds studying computer science. Fully funded, no cameras, no speeches, just action. You weren't forgotten, Sundar said. You were part of my beginning, and you'll be part of someone else's. Dev stood frozen. For a moment his lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. Then slowly he looked down. Tears welled in his eyes. But he didn't wipe them. I didn't want to hurt anyone, he whispered. I just wanted to matter again. Sundar nodded. You do. They stood there in the silence of the broken classroom, two men holding the weight of years they'd never spoken of. Not enemies, not rivals. Just two boys from another life who had taken different roads and finally found their way back to the beginning. When Sundar returned home, it was still dark outside. Arun was waiting on the balcony. He didn't say anything, just handed Sundar a cup of warm chai and sat beside him. You found him? Arun asked. Yes, Sundar said quietly. Was it worth it? Sundar looked out at the horizon. I think we were all lost, he said. And sometimes, finding each other again is the only way forward. Inside, Priya was sleeping peacefully, her breathing even, her hands folded gently on her stomach. The color had returned to her cheeks. The machines no longer beeped with urgency. She was healing. Mira had drawn a new picture that day. It showed 4 people standing in front of their home. A little girl, a woman, 2 men holding hands. Underneath it she had written, My family came back. Months passed, and something extraordinary began to grow. Not in the news, not on the internet, but in the hearts of everyone who had touched this story. Doctors began offering pro bono surgeries in other cities. Inspired by what happened to Priya, Sundar partnered with local organizations to create mobile clinics. Arun started teaching free coding lessons on weekends. Priya began writing. Her story, her pain, her strength. It touched thousands. And Sundar, he stayed, not forever, but long enough to know that success wasn't the summit, it was the bridge. Between where you started and who you bring with you. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast golden light through the window, Sundar sat on the floor with Mira. She was showing him a new drawing, a rocket ship. Where is it going? He asked. She smiled. Home, she said, and for the first time in a very long time, he knew exactly where that was.